Hello everyone, welcome to Elite Residential Drafting and Design. My name is Arslan, and in this video we're kicking off our Barndominium project in Revit 2026. We'll be starting from a blank template and building up the foundation step by step. This is perfect if you're just getting started in Revit or want a clean and efficient workflow for your residential designs. Do not forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button. Feel free to comment and let's get started. So in Revit, I actually have a template open that I made specifically for this Barndominium project, and it's just piggybacking off the residential template that comes with Autodesk Revit. So feel free to just use that, and how you access that is go File, New. When you start a project, it'll ask you what do you want to use for your template file. Just hit Browse, head over to your English Imperial or whichever template folder you want to use. English Imperial, they usually have a residential default template in there. So when you open that one up, you'll see it looks very much the same. The only thing you're going to be missing is really some levels, and I will show what those levels are and how you can add these in. Okay, and there are some levels in here already that are hidden, so you can even reuse those if you wanted to. So without further ado, let's get started on the project. So as I showed you already, just hit New, load up a template, start your project. And the very first thing you want to do is make sure your units are set. So if you type in UN on your keyboard, you'll get to this dialog for project units. The other way to get to it is you go to Manage and hit Project Units. It'll bring the same dialog up. And just make sure your length is in feet and fractional inches. I have that running to 132 inches, same as the default template. You can change that if you want. Don't really care for this. The slope, make sure it's rise over 12 inches, and then for your area, just ensure you're using square feet. That's setting up our units. Next up, we're going to actually take a look at setting our different levels, as I mentioned before. So if you head over to one of your elevations, like the east elevation here, for example, I've already gone ahead and I've set these levels up in my template for this specific project. But if you're just using a residential template, you'll probably just have your first floor, second floor, and your roof or something of that sort. So feel free to go in and add more levels or take out levels as you see fit, and you can replicate what I've got in here, because this is exactly what we're going to be using in this series. Is we're going to have our top of footing floor level, we're going to have our first floor level, we're going to have our first floor ceiling. So that's just how high our ceilings are on the main floor. And then we'll also have our second floor, and then second floor ceiling, and then 1 foot for our roof. So the reason for 1 foot is in this project we're going to use energy heel trusses. So typically those are always a foot higher than our top plate of our ceiling or top plate of our wall. Okay. So feel free to replicate these levels. Feel free to pause the video and replicate these levels. How you do that, if you're not familiar with creating new levels, is in the architecture tab there is a level button, or shortcut LL. You can use that to either come in here, create new levels, right? Snap, create new level, name it whatever you want. I don't know, patio or whatever you want to call it, right? And just set it up and make sure it's there. So the blue just indicates that these actually have a floor plan, and the ones that don't have a blue fill are just more like just datum points that we can reference. At any point we can turn these into floor plans, but for the purpose of what we're doing, we don't actually want these things to have their own plans. It's okay, because we're only really going to have a foundation plan, a first floor plan, a second floor plan, and a roof plan anyways. So that's that. Next step is we're going to create grids. So the grids are used to just confine our building, and we can flex our building as we may need. So whenever we draw walls and stuff of that nature, we can lock them to these grids, and then we can shift these grids around, and it will shrink and expand our building footprint with that. So it's very nice and convenient. keeping grid spacing logical, even if it's tough for now. You can fine-tune the design, or you can fine-tune these grid spacings as the design evolves, but for now I've actually given you these dimensions here, and you can use these dimensions. So we're going to have grid line A and B are 48 feet 6 inches apart, and grid line B and C are 4 feet apart, and grid line 1 and 2 are 28 feet 8 inches apart, and grid line B 2 and 3 are 60 feet and 4 inches apart. Right? So you can easily create those grid lines. Again, if you don't know how to create grid lines, they're in the Architect grid tab right here. Simply go and start creating grid lines, and once you start create this at a weird angle, but once you start creating and naming it something, and you cannot have the same name as another one. So let's say we call this one 4, and if you were to copy or even like hit a grid again and pick a segment and offset it whatever distance, you'll see it'll continue numbering in that fashion. So once you switch your axis, just make sure to rename 1A, and then when you offset it, it will pick up the B and C. At any point, you can go back and rename these, so it's not an issue. Now, as a bonus, let's get, not really a bonus, next step is to actually start drawing our foundation walls. Typically, you can do this vice versa. You can create your main floor plan and then do your foundation walls. I like to do it the other way around, where I'm actually going into my top of footing plan and actually start putting my walls in. So for this, I have a these are the wall types already built into here. I have an 8-inch frost wall that I've created, which is just using a concrete foundation wall material, and it's 8 inches thick. Okay. Oh, sorry, I just realized I was on a different screen. So just I'm gonna bring this here, and you can see it's just an 8-inch concrete wall with a concrete material. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to set it up at top of footing, and we're going to go up to the level first floor. So it's 4 feet 6 high, just below our frost line. And then for location line, I actually want the finished face exterior to be on my grid line like this. And then we can start drawing these walls out. And there you go. I'm just going to hit this define and maybe go consistent color so you guys can see. There are our foundation walls. And they're up. Okay. Next step here would be to create our actual slab. So for that, you can either go to the structural slab or go to the architectural floor. For this, whatever, we'll just go structural slab, 4-inch foundation slab, and I'm just going to pick walls, and I'm going to say the level I want. This is at my first floor. And you can pick these walls, and we'll have our, and hit the check mark. They hit, but they miss. I'm not sure why it's saying that. It should work. Usually I don't do it in this fashion, but you can either use that or go back in your first floor and just edit the sketch and just make sure. And you can see what's happening here is it's that slab is not butting into our frost wall, so you can definitely just do that. And I'm just going to lock it to the grid lines. I'm going to slide it over. You can also use the align button. So AL is the shortcut. If you align, for whatever reason I can't align it, but you can just lock them. Let's just lock this one as well. Lock this one as well. So they're all somewhat locked now, and you can hit enter. And you can see now that it's basically sitting on top of that frost wall, which in reality is not what would actually be happening, because we don't want the slab bearing onto the frost wall. It would actually just be on the ground. So the way it actually had the sketch before was actually right. But whatever, for this purpose of modeling, this is fine. I'm happy with this. And that is basically it. So these walls will form the perimeter. The frost walls will form the perimeter of our slab-on-grade design, and we want to keep them continuous and aligned to grids. So when we do move them, things will fall into place. So by that, what I mean is if I was to actually move this grid line now, let's just dimension this grid line and use that to move it. If I was to move grid line 1 to maybe 34 feet now, you can see it didn't actually move my slab with it. So to actually help with that, you use the align tool and just lock it in. Okay, now I try doing it again. You can see it's going to move with the grid line. So it's very helpful to do it in that fashion. And once you have to be confident that you're not going to move things, then lock them. So I'm just going to go back into each grid line and lock it to the walls to make sure. And hit tab if you can't get the exact face of the wall, but this typically works well. Lock it. Perfect. Now it's all locked in, so if I was to move the foundation wall, it's not going to actually let me move it even by accident. I'll actually have to move the grid. So I'll actually have to go here and really, so if we go back to our first floor, I would actually have to move this, like, if I move this to like 8 feet, you'll see in 3D that will actually follow through. So you'll actually get that 8 feet jog. You don't actually want it. But that's basically it. That's setting up our project, setting up our grids, setting up our levels, setting up our foundation walls, and our slab on grade. Our project is set up, our foundation is in place. In the next video, we'll move on to modeling walls and laying out our main floor. If this was helpful, hit like, subscribe, and feel free to drop a comment if you have questions or want to follow along in the full series. Thank you, and I will see you in another video.